Live. We are live. What's up, everybody? This is Colonel Carson with Family Tree Nuts, and I got my buddy
Bryan Broderick.
Yes, sir.
Guy from the Midwest.
Yeah, the fellow that's you're not the author, but you're the publisher.
Yes, of Daniel Boone and His Neighbors, which was put together from notes from my great-grandfather, who was the leading authority on Daniel Boone in the late 1800s and early 1900s.
Yeah, man, absolutely. And what we're going to do today, though, is we are going to talk about the book and maybe some stories from the book, but we're going to talk about some Boone and Bryan genealogy.
Yeah, you could call it genealogy, but I think we would like to call it, is how did they meet? I mean, how did they come together? What brought them together? What events brought them together? And my good friend Ken Kemper and I discussed it, and he sent me a paper on it. So I thought we'd go over the high points.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm real excited about that. And before I forget, guys, this is a live show. This is absolutely live, so you can join in, ask questions, make comments. If you got questions for Mr. Broderick, he can answer them right here for you because he knows absolutely. We were talking offline. He knows absolutely everything there is to know about the Boone and the Bryan families. All their cousins, all their aunts and uncles. He knows all of it, right?
How many? I mean, we were discussing that just before we went on. Just think of that 13, 14, one family had 17 children and all but one child survived. Well, take that math. And I mean, I got people and you have people that, well, do you know my relationship? And it's like the amount of research it takes and for me to hold that and what pea brain I have is I wish I could help you. I wish I could answer over the top of the head, but you're going to have to get somebody like Russ to research it for you.
Yeah. And hopefully there's some information out there for sure.
Oh, so, I think you'd find it. I know you're very good at it.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man. And we're going to talk about stories about where they came from originally and then how they met up, of different events and intertwined their families and things like that. So going to be a great show. So I'll say it again. You can join in. I see Gail chimes in. She said she's here. Good to see you here, Gail. Let us know where you guys are watching from. I think Mr. Broderick's from, I can't even say that word.
I know it hurts, doesn't it? We have to come down to Ohio and get you. Petwater, Michigan.
Yeah, buddy. I'm a little bit further south. But good deal. Yeah, you guys chime in and stuff and ask some questions. Now, why are you here? What tell them about the book. I know you've been on here before with us and we've talked about the book, but there's a lot of people that are chiming in that probably have never seen that. Tell us about this book project.
Well, my great-grandfather was the grandnephew of Rebecca Bryan Boone. And he was basically, like we said before, the leading authority on it. He wrote for encyclopedias. He was an editor of several newspapers. So he had written the Pioneer Families of Missouri in the 1860s and 70s. It sold 3 million copies, which just amazes me. It went out of print in 1920. So it became very popular with the genealogists because there was no internet back then, and it was a great research book for that. So copies of it in 1940 sold for $500, real money. Yeah. Anyway, during the last part of his life, he wrote about Daniel Boone and his father living with Daniel Boone for almost 2 years, while Daniel Boone treated him for the effects of a snake bite, which, by the way, he later lost his leg. Anyway, he, while living with Daniel and Rebecca, helped Daniel write his manuscripts. And those manuscripts were put together, and during a rumor of an Indian attack that Black Hawk was going to come from Alton, Illinois and into Missouri and massacre everybody, the manuscript was given to Flanders Callaway, who was Jemima Boone's husband. Daniel's favorite daughter. And he lived approximately 5 miles away from Daniel at the time. Put it in a canoe, went down the river. Canoe got upset. Manuscript went down the river, lost forever. So they're known as the lost manuscripts of Daniel Boone. Well, my great-great-grandfather dictated to his son, William S. Bryan, the contents of that manuscript from memory. And he put it into his notes. And he also was a pioneer himself, William S. Bryan, and he grew up with all of Daniel Boone's neighbors. Here, I was circling the wrong way. I got to go this way because it's a camera. So all his neighbors are pictured around Daniel Boone. And he has all the stories about them and his personal relationships with them and stories that those people told. So all this gets compiled and gets put in a box, and William S. passes away, having never published a book. And I was told these stories all my life as a child, didn't remember half of them, and they did get changed, because it's handed down one person to the next. So my father died, and my sister grabbed the box that said William S. Bryant, and we just kind of looked at it. It looked like old deeds and tax records. Didn't get into the bottom of it. My sister passed away 4 years ago, and we rediscovered the book. So I went completely through it trying to consolidate, and here in the bottom of it was 350 pages of notes, and basically is the book that you see today, which is behind me, Daniel Boone and His Neighbors. It is available on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles. Hey, there's your copy.
Yes.
I hope you enjoyed the crayons I sent with that.
Yeah. Yeah. There are a few photos. There are a few drawings of color.
Yes, there are. Yeah, and there were drawings that William S. had done by some of the old pioneers. They're lost forever, whoever they were, but they're rustic, but it gives you some feeling about who they were, what they were. It gives you personalities. Instead of being a history book that just dates, times, places, boredom, it's stories that make these people real, just like you and I talk and have fun and joke back and forth and tell stories on each other. These are the kinds of things that are in the book that makes it real, makes it where you can feel it.
Yeah, like a bear that goes woo, woo, woo,
Like a bear that goes woo, woo, woo. Yeah, Daniel Boone. Daniel Boone did own a couple of slaves, and his one slave, Dan, a small boy, went with him to the Ozarks to look for lead, and he ended up playing with a cub, and the mother did not like that idea, and the mother had to be killed before it killed Dan. So they took the cub and brought it back to Marthasville, where they trained it to do tricks. And one of its tricks was it would sit on its behind and spin around and clap its paws and go woo, woo, woo. Tricks. And the funny part about the story is one day they just had enough because he got into Jonathan Bryan's mill and ate all his grist. And so they ran the bear off, and the bear went off into the woods. Well, then the preacher, they called them road preachers, would go from village to village to village. He's going down this little road, and next thing he knows, there's a bear on the back of his wagon, and his horses go crazy. So bear goes tumbling off, horses go down the road, wagon is completely destroyed. And this poor preacher turns around, and here's a bear sitting on its behind, spinning around, going, woo, woo, woo. He thinks he's lost his mind,
Right.
Which anybody would. How many times you run across a bear that'll do that? Right. So he gets into town and tells everybody about what happened. And they go, oh, yeah, that's the pet bear. But for a short while, I'm sure he thought he'd met the devil.
Absolutely, for sure. So
that's one of the stories that's in the book.
Yeah. So I'm going to see if I can't sum it up real quick and easy there. It's your great-great-grandfather lived with Daniel and Rebecca for a while.
Yeah, Elijah Bryan.
Passed stories down to your great-grandfather, who
Correct.
wrote down all these stories, basically first or second hand accounts.
Firsthand.
Yeah, and then wrote it, and then it sat in the basement for over 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
You found it, and you and your wife put it together and got the book published.
Yes, we did. Yep,
That's
exactly
an amazing story.
Yeah, and it's important that these stories aren't lost. This is real history.
Absolutely.
I mean, we can look up documents and stuff. That's dry, and so somebody has to do it to justify so many things. And I do have to say the book is from word of mouth, so there's some things that aren't quite correct. William S. Bryan likes to talk about Daniel Boone wearing a coonskin hat. The man detested coonskin hats. They were hot, they smelled, and most people of those times wore a felt hat with a brim to keep the weather out of their face and off their neck. So there's some of those kinds of mistakes, and some, romance. And the book says it's a romance. But again, you have to remember it's in the 1860s, 1850s, 1870s. They didn't have a way to confirm these things other than talking to their neighbor about it or somebody firsthand. And our memories do change as we age, and we may not recollect properly what these stories are. I see that Blackhawk chased my ancestor. Teresa says that. Teresa Kern. Yeah, Blackhawk was quite the Indian. Well, he wasn't a chief. He was more like a sergeant. But he and Daniel Boone became great friends toward the end of Boone's life. And he would come and visit and stay in the area as his travels. And of course, he did a autobiography that I'm about to get into.
Right.
Anyway,
right.
We started.
Linda Reese says, hey from Independence, Kentucky. Kathy says hello from Ohio. Teresa says hello. Tracy Clevenger says hashtag go Bucks. No, wait, that wasn't Bucks. That was BLUE. It says go BLUE. And Diane said Sarah Morgan's her fourth great aunt.
Oh, okay.
Sarah Morgan Boone is her fourth great aunt. Kathy says she's from Ohio. Pauline says hello from Paducah, Kentucky. And Teresa says, what a cool lineage. Diane says she's a descendant of the Boones also, but closer to the Morgans. And, McGarry was there as well. She's talking about Hugh McGarry. We better not go off on a tangent on him. I could talk about Hugh McGarry for a while, if that's who she's talking about. Teresa says she wants a copy. It'll be on her Christmas list. We're getting ready to talk about that. Let's see. Marilyn says I'm related to some Bryans from Perry County, Ohio. And Tracy says, ha, ha, ha. So he's talking about the Go Bucks. And Cam says hello from Richmond, Kentucky. And Kurt says watching from Somerset. So how do we get a hold of one of these books?
Well, you can go to Amazon.com, and they are saying that they'll have them to you by the 21st of January. You can go to eBay and search for Daniel Boone and his neighbors, and it'll come directly from me, and I'll go down in my basement and get a book out for you, and I will sign it for you, and I will personalize it to you. If you're a cousin, I'll say, hi there, cousin, and I'll date it, and I'll mail it to you. So you can go to eBay, search for Daniel Boone and his neighbors. You can go on the internet and just search for it, Daniel Boone and his neighbors, and Amazon will come up, Barnes & Noble will come up. You can also go to our website, danielbooneandneighbors.com, and you can order the book from there. Some people don't like to use the internet, don't like whatever reason. If you want, there's a little place where you can give me your name, address, and phone number, and you just mail me a check, and I will send you a book. So you can pay by check, mail. There you go. Yeah, there's our email down at the bottom, or our website down at the bottom, and the title of the book, There we go.
American Hog. There you go. American Hog at
American
iCloud.
Hog. I used to build custom motorcycles for a little while.
There you go. That'll work.
Yeah.
So you told me before we got on here, though, is that there's multiple ways that they could get this book by Christmas. You know, they can order it these different ways, and you can make sure they have it by the 24th, right?
If it'll be additional postage, but I'm sure one of Santa's elves will come by your house and help you get it to them.
Yeah, there you go. So it's possible. It's possible. It's right.
It's possible. If it's real important, we'll get it to you.
I told you, just blame it on COVID, man. You know, just
there you go.
COVID. You know?
I'll do the best I can with what I have, but at this point, I think it's a little late in the game.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but it could be a New Year's gift, right?
It could be a New Year's gift, or you could just put a picture of the book in an envelope, and I'll mail it to them. And you know, if it needs to be personalized to a different person than yourself, be sure to let me know so I don't get the wrong name in the book. We want to make sure we get it to your person that you want to have it.
AC Tracy said, if you live in Michigan, #GoBlue, you could drive to Pentwater and pick one up yourself. He said, so,
you can. In fact, we have several stores and bookstores around the area that do have the book. Up north Market there in Pentwater carries our book. Several bookstores in the area carry the book. In Ludington, Michigan, both bookstores carry our book. There's a little bookstore in Whitehall, Michigan that carries our book. So we're getting out there. We're getting out there. Teresa Kern, I wondered, are you related to any Kerns that were wagon builders back in the 1850s in St. Louis? That's the other side of my family. Jacob Kern. And if you know anything about St. Louis, it was Lemp Brewery. His mansion was right next door to the Lemps. Anyway, why don't we talk about how the Boone's and Bryan's got together? That's kind of why we started, and we always get to talking to each other about stuff.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. And Teresa asked, "What's the best story your ancestor learned about Boone that is so important to share?" And you could go into that, or if that's part of the story that we're getting ready to get into there, or whichever.
There's so many, and the stories that always stick in my mind are the stories of tragedy. Boone once said that his footprints were filled with blood, and God knows that was true. What that poor man went through. 2 of his children killed, his own brother butchered and beheaded within his sight. And of course had to hear it. So the heartbreaking stories about what he went through tend to touch me more than the others. And yet a man like that went through those type of tragedies tended to be extremely kind, extremely generous. He was a judge and judged minor crimes, which entailed getting lashings. And after the lashings were given by a sheriff, Daniel would not do the lashings. He detested the practice. He would take the offender into his house, treat the Boones, and Rebecca would feed them. So he was not a hardened man after dealing with all those tragic losses, which that just amazes me. So that's my story about what I take from Daniel Boone. And I see Teresa says North St. Louis Kerns. Well, Jacob Kern was my great-great-great-grandfather, and he built wagons for the North during the Civil War. So Teresa,
North St. Louis, no St. Louis.
I think she means North St. Louis, and that's where he's from, is North St. Louis.
Gotcha.
So, hi there, cousin Teresa.
Yeah, there you go. That's for sure. And then I see Whitdock Cemetery Tours is watching here. guys, if you haven't checked out that YouTube channel, you definitely need to do that. They're even much bigger than we are. They've got all kinds of he's got videos galore of some really cool stuff. You could watch for days, kind of thing. And then there's the stories that are on there are awesome that he's got. So check out Whitdock Cemetery Tours too on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe there. Teresa says that she's a psychologist. Oh, and by the way, we got to do some stuff together with Docs, but Teresa said she's a psychologist, so intergenerational trauma is real. And I missed one there. I wanted to point out there. We had one. Where'd it go? Oh, there you go. Judy's watching from Golden Valley, Arizona. That sounds hot.
Wow. Good for her. Valley. Out there in Arizona, but lovely weather, I'm sure, this time of year.
Yeah. PS says they come from Bryant's and Bigelow's and Pratha and Moses. So, yeah.
Well, it seems like Teresa is definitely my relative because Jacob Kern came to Illinois just across the river from St. Louis, and he married a provost, and provost was given the land across in Illinois by a Napoleon's son. He was a bodyguard for Napoleon's son. So that's how they came together. So definitely we're related. Isn't it amazing how you run into people?
Yeah, buddy, no doubt. Let's talk some genealogy, some family history there. So where does this story begin?
Well, the Boone's and Bryan came together probably around 1749. Morgan Bryan shows up in the Pennsylvania tax records about 1718, and the year following he marries Martha Bryan. There may be a connection in Pennsylvania with the Boones, but there's no record of it. William Bryan was supposedly near the Saskatchewan River. Morgan Bryan was near Brandywine, so they weren't that close together, and where they probably crossed paths in Pennsylvania.
Did they come from? Were they from Ireland?
The Bryans are all from Ireland. We're all mixed. Yep. You can trace us back to Brian Boone, which is the king of the Irish clans.
Yeah.
But the next thing that comes up is that Bryan, with another fellow, sold 70,000 acres in the Shenandoah Valley in Northern Virginia. The odd coincidence about that is that Morgan moved in 1745 to where Roanoke is established now, and the Boones and their trips from Pennsylvania to the Yadkin were on the path through Morgan's land, where he had a mill north of Martinsville. So the probability of them crossing paths is very great because, of course, when you traveled like that, you stopped at just about every residence because they were miles and miles apart. Hi, how are you? I'm coming through, and probably would get a meal. And then you'd ask about the hunting and the land and so forth. So it was always an adventure. And of course, you got your news by stopping at any established settlement. So after the death of Rebecca's mother, whom with Joseph Bryan had been living with Morgan and Martha, Joseph being her father, Rebecca, as an infant, lived with Morgan and Martha because her mother had died. So she and her 2-year-old sister were actually raised by Morgan and Martha Bryan. Her father remarried and had a whole nother family. But I'm sure what happened is Rebecca and her sister became attached to Morgan and Martha and preferred to stay with them.
And that's her grandparents.
And that would have been her aunt and uncle.
Okay.
Yeah. So she was raised by her aunt and uncle. So then you wherever Morgan and Martha go from that point, there's always Rebecca. So we know that's how she ended up meeting Boone at several crossings while he and his father, Squire, were looking for a place to live. In 1749, Squire Boone with his son Daniel and his older sister and Henry Miller went on an exploratory trip to North Carolina to look for a home prior to moving the following year. And
why did he take that girl? Why did he take that girl with him?
Well,
that's
it
not
wasn't
that
that particular
normal.
Wasn't that particular daughter, but they were Quakers. And the story that I've heard and I've read several times is that Daniel's sister became pregnant before marrying, then married, and of course the child came soon after the marriage. And the Quakers, I can't remember what you call it, shunned not only the daughter, but the entire family.
Entire family, yeah.
And in those times when you were shunned, you could starve to death because people would have nothing to do with you. So that kind of makes me feel that that's what prompted them to look for new lands and a new place to go. It was because of the shunning.
Yeah, was there something to do with weapons and things like that too? And some people have told stories about them that they didn't believe in fighting in any kind of battles or anything like that too. But
well, this is true, and unfortunately, to survive, you had to fight. You had to survive because somebody was going to try and kill you, if not a despot of some sort. Then the Native Americans were trying to kill you, and it happened to Daniel's son was murdered by a Native American that was their friend. And tragically, he was tortured during the killing and finally asked, I think his name was Big Jim, just kill me, get it over with. A 16-year-old boy being tortured and stabbed multiple times. And those were his final words were, just kill me and get it over with. Here again, like I said, his footprints just full of blood. No better way to describe it. Anyway.
You got a question there. Family, God and Country. My name's Eric Boone, direct descendant. Why are us Boones not entitled to any family land?
Good question. Squire and Daniel both left Kentucky because they had begun to speculate in land and they had large holdings. Daniel sold 3,000 acres and then another lot of 2,000 acres leaving Kentucky, but the rest pretty much went for taxes after discovering all these areas. So as soon as he would discover an area, settle it, then the little counties would become established and they would begin to tax. Well, when you own 20, 30,000 acres, no telling how many little counties you might cover, and they're all trying to tax you. And of course, it's not like you send a letter and the letter gets there in 72 hours and, oh, here's your tax bill. He lost Daniel Boone and Squire Boone, which Squire did just as much as Daniel did, all lost their land through various taxation and various lawsuits over surveys. So what money he had when he left Kentucky was pretty much taken through lawsuits.
And I'd like to see what kind of pie or what kind of slice of the pie Eric could get, for that, even if he had, at this point in time, right?
There was some restitution to Daniel Boone. His son Nathan knew a senator, and that senator got the United States government to give Daniel Boone 1,000 acres towards the end of his life as reparation for all the discoveries he did, and he was penniless. He had nothing, and he took that land and sold it and paid off all his debts and all his lawsuits. Again, penniless after it was done, but he did say, "I can go to my grave knowing I don't owe man a penny." Yeah.
Linda says, "Is it Bryan or Bryant?"
Well, the original spelling of Bryan's is Bryant, and it is in the Irish spelling is Briant. The Bryans dropped the T and changed it to Y to spite the English, and changed their names before they came into the United States. So when you get back into the 1700s and 1600s, you'll see that Bryan does change to Bryant, and it's both spelling Bryan and Brian. But then you go even further back, and it's O'Brien's. So it's a deviation of O'Brien's to Bryant to Bryan. You know, of course, the O means son of, so they dropped the son of, and that's how we got here.
Awesome, good stuff. Teresa's talking about. She's the vice chair of the DAR there in Texas, so she's got access to some great records and things.
Yes.
And Diane says
DAR is a wonderful organization.
Yeah. Diane says taxes are why so many Kentuckians migrated to Indiana. Lincoln's migrated too. Yep. And
the Lincolns and the Boones were close neighbors at one time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Ancestor Stalker 1 says, appreciate these lives like this. I was intrigued by the last one you all did together. Only thing that could make it better would be sitting around a campfire to hear and listen to these stories. Hey, we should do that one time, right?
We ought to this spring, I'm going to come down and I'm going to see you, Russ, and that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to sit and swat skeeters and tell stories.
Sounds like a winner. Look forward to it. So,
and anybody's invited.
There you go. Everybody, right? We do.
Yeah. Open bar at Russ' house. Oops.
It can happen.
That's good. We've done worse.
One of the things that's neat about this is, we're talking about pre-1750, and we're talking about people that are living in Pennsylvania, buying land in Virginia, moving to North Carolina. What in the world? It's amazing how mobile the people are, but that was a major route of migration.
Yes.
Of the Scots-Irish and German, that settled in the back country, to be a buffer. Don't get me started on the Scots-Irish. I'll talk for 6 days about that. But it's interesting that they basically went through that channel, that Shenandoah Valley, and then moved on. And as you have more and more kids, you can only break the pie up so many times. You got to move on further west. And the reason they went south is because the mountains were in the way.
Yeah. And it seemed like it was every 25 years. Every 25 years. Either they exhausted the ground or, like you say, taxed out of town. And the Germans were very good about following and buying the land for next to nothing because it may have been exhausted from planting corn for 5 years in a row. Well, the Germans knew how to fertilize land where the pioneers didn't.
Right.
So the Germans did quite well.
Yeah.
In making the land very productive just by following the early pioneers. And there was land speculation. I mean, the Bryans were big into land speculation, and so were the Boones. And they were constantly going out and discovering it. Of course, the whole reason the Boones ended up in Missouri was because the Spanish couldn't get anybody to take them up on their offer to move to west of the Mississippi River, where the English and the French had relationships with the Native Americans. The Spanish did not. So it was just a matter of luck that Boone came along. His son preceded him, talked to the Spanish governor in St. Louis, Spanish governor says if he'll come here, we'll give him 1,000 acres, thereabouts. It was 860 acres. If he'll come here and he'll settle Missouri, we'll make him the general, we'll make him the commandant, we'll make him a judge, and we'll give him this land. Well, the timing was perfect because the Missouri Indians, which there was a tribe of Missouri, had been decimated by smallpox. And the other tribes, the Osage and the Sauk, which were enemies, had, between the smallpox and disease and starvation and wars, they just eventually assimilated into other tribes, which left this huge opening in the middle of Missouri along the Missouri River undefended by the Native Americans, because the Sauk and the Osage hadn't moved into those areas and were not familiar with those areas. So Boone just, boom, perfect timing, landed in there just at the right time.
Yep.
So yeah, and like you say, he was very disenchanted with Kentucky. Didn't even bother to stop in Illinois. Just took the off Spanish.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Rick lost that land.
Huh?
The land that the Spanish gave him, Daniel failed to register it, and the United States didn't recognize it.
Well, then they sold it to the French like a year or two later. Yes. And then they sold it to the United States a year later. So
he lost everything because he didn't register it. And that was part of the reason why the United States government later gave him 1,000 acres.
It's just like us Scots Irish, though. You know what I'm saying? You know, it's hard to get out of that position of life, I guess, is what I'm saying. You know? So,
even William S. Bryan says we always manage to make money in our lifetime, but we also manage to lose all of it before we die.
Yeah.
And of course, if it wasn't for alcohol, the Irish would rule the world.
Yes. I would say yes. We better not get on that subject. No. but Rick French says it's amazing how that people got around so easily. There, heck, I get lost mushroom hunting, he said. So,
they had an uncanny sense of where they were. But, and we think about how primitive it was in those days. And yes, it was primitive, but at the same time, they were very ingenious about how they used tools and how they got around. I was looking at my great-grandfather's diary. He had lost his leg from that snake bite, and he went to New York in 1850. Now imagine he's coming from rural Missouri in 1850, and he travels by horse and wagon, gets on a train with one leg, makes it all the way to New York to a specialist that makes him a wooden leg. Imagine what he saw in advancement.
Yeah.
And he really wasn't all that surprised by it, which kind of took me by surprise, because you would have thought it would have been like the proverbial country bumpkin coming to town with his mouth open, looking at all these amazing things.
Yeah, he was living backcountry, wasn't he?
Yeah, they weren't all that backcountry. They weren't all that primitive. And another thing is they were proficient at writing. Not only the men, but the women. All the Bryan women have better penmanship and are much more better read than the men were, at least in that section of Missouri. Two of William S. Bryan's sisters became school teachers, one of which has a school named after her in St. Charles County. So they were, even though they were out in the middle of nowhere, they were well educated. They were self-educated, but they did a good job of educating themselves.
Right, they weren't stupid.
Not at all. Not at all. No.
And that's one of the things that modern day folks in Appalachia, get pretty aggravated about. Just because we're country doesn't mean we're stupid. So
no, not necessarily. We just have different values.
And George White says, were the Bryans kin to the Whites somehow?
There are so many, Brian. I mean, you and I were discussing that earlier. So many families had 10, 12. One family had 17 children and only lost one child. So all the rest had families. So it's very possible because you do the math and it's tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people after 8, 9 generations.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And
so the answer is probably yes.
The answer most likely is yes. And I don't have the gray matter or a computer that would hold all that data. It takes somebody like Russ doing the investigation for you. And he's very proficient at that. Not because he does this with me, but because that's what he does for a living, and he does.
That's
a
why
good
my
job.
eyes are red. You see how red my eyes are. It's when you get these projects done for Christmas. I'm like,
Yeah, I understand you haven't had much sleep. You're kind of running
my
on
wife
coffee.
called me Smeagol. She called me Smeagol coming out of my little cave. And,
precious.
Yeah, every now and then you get something to eat. So
crawling out from underneath the bridge.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah, you had quite a project.
Yeah, buddy.
It took you down many paths.
Yeah, man. And Kristen said she's descended from Squire Boone through his son Edward. It's pretty cool.
Okay, through Edward. All righty.
Yeah, Teresa's ancestors signed the oath of toleration.
Yeah.
And Diane said, "This is a super interview. I look forward to getting the book." So
excellent.
Yeah,
get it from eBay, and I'll personalize it to you and sign it.
Yeah.
Sure remind me that you saw it on this show. I'll mention it.
Personalized.
There you go. Yeah, and all you have to do is figure out my writing.
You remember you were just talking about the women in Missouri, your ancestors that were the proficient handwriting. You're definitely not one of the women. They say that bad handwriting is a sign of intelligence, though.
Not in my case. Not in my case. No. My mother used to give me a marble and set me in a corner and keep me busy for hours.
So we talked about the Morgans. They were moving down into the Shenandoah Valley, had a mill.
Yes.
Daniel Boone's father, Squire Daniel, and Daniel's sister and her husband are passing through there, scouting out some land in North Carolina to live in, crossing some paths and things. They saw that little redhead. She was red-haired, wasn't she?
She was a strawberry blonde with black eyes.
Yeah. I mean, she was on a TV show, but
No. Well, reasoning would suggest that the Boone group did a lot of exploring, especially Daniel and Henry Miller. And at the time, the Bryans were just beginning to settle in a permanent place, each a few miles distance from each other, and located in such a way that no matter which way you went, you'd cross their property, and the Boones would have to have some sort of interaction. And of course, when you're traveling like that, there's always generosity in those days when somebody came through because they brought you news of what's going on in the outside world and just general hospitality. You stayed, you ate, you might stay for a couple of days. And of course, the Boones and Daniel Boone and Henry Miller were interested in the availability of land and how the hunting was and so on and so forth. So they were asking, what's out there? What's next? What are we going to come to? And what's the best way to get there without getting in any trouble? So there was this constant interaction with the Bryans at that point, just because they had settled in that area that they were going through. The two main trails, crossing the Yadkin twice, both times they had to go across Bryan land. So it goes to reason that's how they finally came together.
Yeah, there's ridge lines on both sides, The
ridge lines on both sides, yeah. And you know the topography better than anyone. You've been all through there. So, like I say, in 1749 to 1750, Daniel and Henry Miller were traveling about and made it their business to check out the relatively few settlers in the locations. Now, at that time, Rebecca would have been about 10 years old in 1749. And at that time, most girls at the age of 14 married.
Sure.
Very, very young. Of course, life expectancy wasn't that great either. So during that time, Daniel Boone and Rebecca Boone had to have seen each other, if not interacted. Of course, she's a little girl of 10. And Daniel was more interested in hunting and exploring than girls, being a younger man himself. So as time goes on, interactions go on. It was at the wedding of William Bryan, Morgan's brother, about 1755, when Rebecca Boone, using her smile and her attractive black eyes, finally got Daniel's attention and turned him from hunting and exploring to romance. And everybody in my family that spoke of it and some historic records pretty much agree that it was at William Bryan's wedding that they became interested in each other. So
William is her uncle or her brother?
Her uncle.
Yeah, who she's living with.
William. No, she's living with Morgan.
Her other uncle.
Her other uncle. Remember, there's a lot of Bryans. That's Irish. Boy. Get at it. You know.
So her uncle is marrying Daniel Boone's brother or sister.
Say that again? No, her uncle is marrying Daniel Boone's brother.
Got it. What?
Which, I'm sorry, was marrying Daniel. William Bryan married Daniel Boone's sister, Mary.
Okay. All right.
So the Bryans are actually, us Bryans are actually related to the Boones twice through marriage, with Rebecca and with Mary Boone, who married William.
Yes, and that's why they, for the rest of the story here, for the next 100 years from then, they're all living together.
Yes,
other family members and cousins.
And lots of cousins, and it grows and grows and grows. And they discovered it together. They formed a partnership. They would build the fort, establish a fort, and settlers would move to the fort. And then they'd go establish another fort or another salt lick and move it forward. And then that's how they advanced westward constantly. The Boones and the Bryans didn't do it every 25 years. They did it every 4 or 5 years.
Right.
Because there was money in it. One of the things Daniel Boone, and most people don't even know it, it's not mentioned. Daniel Boone didn't even mention it. Very rarely is there any reference towards it. But at one time, he had a general store and he sold liquor in it, and they housed people. So it was a hotel of sort, I guess you could call it. So you could get a meal, you could get your calico, you could get your gunpowder. He was also a gunsmith, a very good gunsmith. You could get your gun repaired, you could get an axe, all these things in a store, and he was quite good at it. He and Rebecca did quite well with it, and decided to sell it and move west.
Move on. He said if he could see the smoke from another chimney, it was time to go, right?
But I guess he sold it for enough money, and it was getting too crowded around there and too much government control, so let's get out of here.
Which goes into the whole Scots-Irish and how they deal and how they've shaped America and politics today, but
moving forward,
kind of thing. So,
and the taxes upon taxes.
Right. Kirsten Early said, is there anything about a Lewis Green in your book?
No, not to immediate memory. No, I don't think there's anything about a Lewis Green.
And Teresa brings up Bryant Station. So
yes,
but she spelled it Bryant's, and
it's spelled both ways, but it's mostly it's spelled Bryan, Bryan.
Mm-hmm.
And it was established by I think William. Don't quote me on that. I have to look. Memories. I'm almost 70, so mine's kind of
Rick,
slipping.
Rick says, was that bar in Marysville, Ohio? Wasn't that in Maysville?
Yes, I think it was in Maysville that he had his store.
That's what I thought there in
Yeah,
Maysville.
I know there's a house near there that they say is Boone's. Of course, it's had many additions to it.
Oh yeah, been there many times.
Yeah,
yeah. But yeah,
I wonder if that wasn't the store. I wonder if that wasn't the store.
Yeah, I think it was before, like he moved to Maysville, then he actually moved into West Virginia for a while. And there's actually there's some argument between some people. And I've had to do quite a bit of digging, and it overlaps. And the only thing that I could say is that he lived in a couple of places at the same time.
Oh yeah, I would not doubt that at all.
Depending on where he, kept his
where the hunting was good, where the hunting and trapping was good. Because let's face it, he sold furs.
Sure.
And he was known to, even in his 80s, to load a dugout up with furs, get into the Missouri River, which I don't know if many people know the Missouri River. It's a treacherous river. It's not a creek by any stretch of imagination. Lots of whirlpools. And here's an 82-year-old man in a dugout canoe filled with furs, no telling how much weight. He just gets to St. Louis, hits a whirlpool, and loses the whole damn thing in the river. Just one tragedy after another. Say he dusts himself off, gets up, goes back, traps some more.
Start from scratch, over and over and over again. That's been his whole life. So
he brought in a lot of money for himself, enough to subsist.
Donna says her birch
bacon and furs.
Oh, and before I forget, if you're chiming in, we've got a lot more people watching now than when we started, which is the time of the night that it is. So we generally get more people watching. If you're just chiming in with us right now, remember this is on YouTube, so you could go back, and it's on our Facebook, but you can go back and find it pretty quickly on our Facebook. But you can also see it on our YouTube channel forever. So this will be on there. So if you've missed the beginning of this, you can go back tomorrow, next week, Christmas Day, whatever you want to do, and go back and watch it.
Or get a friend, watch it Christmas Day.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you don't want to watch football, and turn this on.
There you go.
Remember, you can get my book from Amazon, Daniel Boone and His Neighbors, or you can buy it directly from me through eBay. There's the book. Da, 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 da. Yeah, and that's also over my shoulder. You can, like I say, if you get it from eBay, I will personally sign and personalize the book to you. I have to charge a little more in postage. The book is $25, and when you get it from me on eBay, then I got to charge you $5 to mail it. If you get it from Amazon, you can save the $5 because, let's face it, they got more pull with the post office than I do.
But you don't get an autograph then, right? So
no, you don't get an autograph, and you don't get it personalized to you. It's also available at Barnes & Noble. It's all available on our website, danielbooneandneighbors.com.
Awesome. Donna Jones asked, my Birchfield ancestors were neighbors of Boone. And Jimmy Don Russell said, are there any Russells or Beans in your book?
No Beans, but I think the's a Russell. But what really just caught my eye was P.S. I don't know who P.S. is. I guess his name is Postscript. Anyway, did Jonathan Bryan start a mill? Now, here's a fun story from out of the book. Yes, indeed, Jonathan Bryan did start a mill. It would take all day to grind enough to feed 2 families. So it was a little mill that he had on his place. And Jonathan Bryan was Rebecca and Daniel's favorite nephew. He was raised with Rebecca. And when Daniel and Rebecca moved into Missouri in 1799, he immediately followed in 1800. Christmas Day of 1800, he arrives and buys the land right next to Daniel Boone. So they're abutted up together. So they're a mile apart because, they bought sections in those days, 1,300 acres or 1,680 acres. So Jonathan was pretty well off. He came with some money. He had a flatboat that he brought, and he started a little mill along with a still, because of course when you grind the mill, you can take and make alcohol from the grindings. And Daniel Boone's dog, Cuff was his name, and of course every dog that Daniel Boone had, he called Cuff. So it wasn't one particular, but he was a hound dog, and a very smart hound dog. And he would come over to Jonathan's mill, and Jonathan had a plate that the grindings would go on. And Jonathan would show up in the afternoon, and there was no corn grindings. The wind blowing off? Oh, well, we'll just start up again tomorrow. Well, it turned out that Cuff was coming over every day and lapping up the grindings. And when the mill didn't grind it fast enough, he would sit and howl at the mill to make, come on, bring it up. So Jonathan found out.
Was it fermented at all or anything like
that? No, it was freshly ground. It wasn't fermented.
Okay. No.
Yeah. So Jonathan thought, well, I'll fix that. And he wouldn't do anything to harm the dog. He put a pewter pot that he had, like a water pot or tea pot thing. And it was just large enough that Cuff could get his head in it, which he didn't realize. And it became adhered to the dog's head.
Oh.
So the dog runs home to Daniel Boone's home, and is making all sorts of noise and ruckus. And Daniel runs out the door with his rifle and witnesses this animal with the body of a dog and a tin head, and almost shot him because he didn't know what it was. It was his own dog, Cuff. And apparently that cured Cuff, because he never went back and ate the grindings at the mill.
That's funny.
So that's the Jonathan Bryan story. I hope that filled you in there, P.S. Postscript.
Yeah, at the mill there. So, and let's see. Trip Boone says, greetings from Edward Boone's distant relative in Northern California.
Hi there, cousin. How are you?
Yeah. Holly says, love this. Thank y'all. Daniel was 7th grade uncle, and Rebecca was first cousin, 8 times removed. We'll have to get this book. Yes, Holly, you will.
Please do. And send me a note when you order it to remind me of this little message, and I'll definitely write in the book for you this memory.
Absolutely. Teresa says, amazing story. He was a BA, and Ancestor Stalker says, so wait, your Bryan family also was documented as spelling it Bryant.
Correct. And it was Briant and Bryant. And it all references back to the O'Briens, which is son of Brian.
Sure. And often they didn't know how to spell it anyway. So,
well, that happens a lot when you'd come into the country and whoever was doing the immigration papers would spell it however they wanted.
Look at that. Rick says he has a World Book Encyclopedia from back in the 70s. It says that Daniel Boone died from eating too many sweet potatoes in a sitting. Well, I ain't kidding. It really did.
That was his last meal, was venison, a big chunk of venison. He loved sweet potatoes, and he did have a big appetite. He had just walked back from Jemima Boone's and Flanders Callaway place, and he ate a big chunk of venison and a bunch of sweet potatoes. But some people seem to think that he died from peritonitis, from a burst appendix, and some of the signs kind of point in that direction. Of course, nobody knew surgery how to do an appendectomy, so he just died.
Well, he's 86, 87 years old, too.
He was 86 years old.
I can't ever remember when he was born because of the way the calendar, he jumped, his birthday changes, too,
Yeah, it does that, too.
Yeah.
There's another, we've mentioned Jemima Boone, and a lot of your people may not realize Jemima Boone and 2 of Callaway's sisters Flanders Callaway's sisters, were playing in a canoe, cooling their feet, she said, to soften a splinter in her foot. And the canoe broke loose, went across the river to the other side, and she was kidnapped by several Native Americans. And the girls knew well enough to leave bits of clothing and break branches to leave a trail so Daniel could follow. And one of those that followed was Flanders Callaway, along with several other pioneers. And of course, they rescued the three girls. That was the basis for the Last of the Mohicans.
Yeah.
And
isn't that wild?
Flanders Callaway was the part of the rescue party. He married Jemima Boone.
Of course he did. I guess he had an end there, didn't he? You know,
he had an end, but he was a knight in shining armor. And
right.
So a happy ending and a lovely life together. So yeah, that a lot of folks may not realize that's the story. John Van Bibber. Steve Smith says he's a descendant of John, and there's a lot of stories about the Van Bibbers in the book.
Oh, really? Cool.
Yeah. So yeah, John, you need to get the book and read about your ancestors.
And they were at the Battle of Point Pleasant, Lord Dunmore's War, with three of my great grandfathers.
Yeah.
So, see how we're all connected there. So
from Francis Callaway, his name was Flanders Callaway, and he was very accomplished on his own.
So they meet there in what you said 1755 in the wedding and such, and then they move into the Yadkin. The whole family groups do, don't they?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the Yadkin is kind of near around Winston-Salem, Wilkesboro, North Carolina, that little bowl right there, just on that side of the mountains where so many folks that have ancestors that migrated into Kentucky and then further west first had a generation right there in the Yadkin. So
yeah, it was almost like the original gateway to the west.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. And that's where Daniel,
like you said, everything channeled in that direction. It was the obvious path to take.
Sure.
Which is another interesting thing that Ken Kemper, I keep bringing him up because of his vast knowledge. He has documented every step of the way that the Boones took all the way from Pennsylvania to Missouri. And he's got all the locations, all the paths, all of it documented. He hasn't released it in a paper yet, but I can't wait to see that. Unfortunately, we all know how expensive it is to publish these books. So if you're so inclined and you want to help Ken Kemper put his papers together, he is 83 years old. He's trying to assemble all this in a book, and funds are a little tight. Any books that are ordered and I sell from this thing we're doing today, Russ, and into the first week of January, I'm going to donate $5 from each book, which is my profit, to Ken Kemper. And if you'd like to donate, you can make a check out to Daniel Boone and Frontier Research Association and mail it to Ken Kemper at 1770 Hickory Hill Drive in Hermann, Missouri, 65041. And of course, go ahead.
I'll put that out on a post. I'll post that on our Facebook, with that way they can find that info.
I would really appreciate that.
Yeah.
And I think the value of what Ken has, the depth of knowledge is unfathomable. I don't know how the man keeps it all together, but he's the one that goes through all the dry stuff. He's the one that goes through the tax records and verifies everything. He's not There's no romance in anything he writes.
Which is why he does not want to do this in video form.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. We tried to talk him into it. I tried to talk him into it, and he's camera shy. He doesn't want to be distracted from organizing these books. I mean, we all know time is limited, and we want to get these things done while we still have all our marbles in one bag. Of course, there's a large hole in my marble bag.
It's a good thing your great grandfather wrote the book, right? So
yeah. Well, he made it to 96, and he did a good job.
Yeah, that's good genes. Carrie White says, "Is there anything about the Bush family?" I don't know if it's a guy or a gal, but I am descended from Bush and Bryan family. That's probably more the Bush and the Bryan. Those are probably more the ones that stayed here in Kentucky, isn't it? Or did some Bush family members go there as well out in Missouri?
Well, there's the Anheuser-Busch family, of course, that started the brewery.
I don't
know if there's any relationship there.
I think they're referring to Captain Billy Bush.
Captain Billy Bush, yeah.
The settlement outside of Boonesboro. I may be wrong, but I'm assuming that's what they're talking about there. But Alex says, where did the search party find Jemima and the Callaway girls? Were they heading northeast of Boonesboro? Yes.
Yep. Yeah. I don't know the exact location of where they found them.
I'm 98% sure that they got them the next morning. I think it was the next morning, the wee hours of the morning, they caught up to him there. And
sunrise.
Yeah, they would have traveled 20 miles, there, which would be probably the location then would be modern day Clark or Bourbon counties, kind of out there close to where Ned Boone was murdered there later on, a couple years after that.
Tragic story.
Yeah, because I mean, there was roads. I mean, they weren't roads, but they were paths.
Yeah, well established. Yeah,
right. The Buffalo Trace ran a little bit north of that spot there. I mean, these were common.
The Buffalo Trace was a major Native American trading path.
Sure.
So it started by following the buffalo and the elk and deer for food. The Native Americans naturally followed them, and the animals created a path, usually a path of least resistance. And then, of course, man followed hunting the animals, and then established trade routes
for thousands of years. It's hard for us
to thousands of years. Yeah.
These people were moving around, and a lot of people think the Shawnee, the Shawnee are from Ohio, right? Kind of.
Kind of all over. Yeah,
they're from Florida and Alabama and up near New York, and
even the Osage got that far south. Which is pretty amazing.
Right. We're going on some serious tangents there, aren't we? So.
Yeah, and there's an interesting theory when we talk about the Native Americans. Just imagine if they had not done like the Celts. In Ireland, and been separate tribes. Imagine if all those tribes united as one force, how different our world would be today.
Yeah.
But they were basically fairly easy to overcome because they were warring amongst themselves and couldn't congeal to form a defensive front.
Yeah.
Just a thought that happened to come across.
Just a culture clash, clash of cultures, and that's for sure.
Yeah. So they couldn't combine, but imagine the forces they could have if they did combine, if they did unite into one force. It would have been able to overcome it.
So what's neat is that we've talked about, we started out up in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. We end up in the Shenandoah Valley. There in Virginia, we end up into Yadkin. Then we're up into Kentucky, over into West Virginia, back to Kentucky, all the way to Missouri. This is one generation.
Yes. Amazingly, it's one generation. Now, he did live to be 86 years, and but like we were discussing earlier, usually it was every 25 years that they'd make a jump. Not in Boone's and the Bryan's case. They flew. I mean, what was it, 1,300 and some odd miles? Just into the Virginias? From Pennsylvania? How many miles is that? That one trail was. The longest trail was nearly 1,300 miles.
That's the old wagon road, that goes there through the valley there. And it's amazing that they were that mobile, for sure.
Yeah.
But
and then the interesting thing is the 30s and 40s, people never, in Ireland, people never traveled more than 20 miles away from their home. And a lot of people that stayed up east never traveled more than 4 or 5 miles away from their settlement. And here you got the Boone's, the Bryan's went thousands of miles.
And that's real living, that's real.
Yeah.
People really lived. They really did.
Just had to keep his knees in the breeze and his nose in the wind.
That's right. Drip Boone says he lives where Alfonso Boone moved and died, in Orville, California. I know that some of the Boones did go all the way to California, and just like I think what was it? Daniel Boone's grandsons went all the way out that far.
Yes, they did. They did.
And Gene Townsend Purvis says the Bush family settled in Orange County, Virginia. James and Garrett Townsend were part of the settlement before they moved to Boonesboro and settled that area. So, yeah.
A lot of the Bryans moved to California too in the early 1800s. So, once Lewis and Clark opened it up, there was an enormous flood into the West. I think the settlement of the West was half the time it took to settle from Kentucky to Missouri.
Right. Yeah. Isn't that crazy? But, so was there any more of that story that you wanted to go over this evening?
No, I think we've covered pretty much, how they met, how they congealed, how they came together, and the romance of Daniel and Rebecca. Yeah,
that strawberry blonde with dark eyes.
Black eyes. Yeah, she had dark eyes.
That's different, isn't it?
Yeah. Because usually Irish are green or blue.
Yeah, for sure. So, what is there any other stories about that's in the book that you want to spill? That's in there? Anything that comes to mind, kind of thing?
There's so many stories, and it's it's funny. It's like somebody can tell a lot of jokes, and then you say, "Tell me a joke." And then you can't bring one to mind. There's lots of stories about Daniel Boone and his dog Cuff. How Cuff one day woke up Jonathan Bryan, and the dog one ear was torn, and he was in pretty bad shape, but the dog was intelligent enough to go to Jonathan Bryan. Not even, he belonged to Daniel Boone, but he was near Jonathan Bryan. It's before sunrise, and the dog is insistent that Jonathan follow him. So Jonathan waits till the sun comes up and follows the dog, and they go about half a mile down to the canebrake, and the dog had actually killed 2 bears in a battle that it had. I mean, that's unimaginable. How a dog could do that, and he was. I don't know how big of a dog he was. I don't know if he's as big as a Great Dane or small as a Corgi, but that was a pretty interesting story about how Cuff did that. And it made the dog rather famous in the area because they saw him as a hero after being able to kill 2 bears.
No doubt.
By cutting, both of them were killed by cutting the jugular. He'd gotten them by the throat and pierced the jugular.
It's kind of like, is it Wilsey? It killed the wolf with the.
Yeah, Wilsey was a slave.
Yeah,
he was Jonathan Bryan's slave. that was the same age as Elijah, and they were raised together. So Wilsey went with Elijah when he moved into his own place. And one day there was a wolf that attacked, and Wilsey grabbed it by the head, snapped its neck, killed it, deader than a hammer. And I don't know if Wilsey skinned the wolf or it was done for him, but he wore that wolfskin jacket with large brass buttons. And
wow,
people would, ask about the unique jacket or coat, and all the pioneers couldn't wait to tell and brag on Wilsey and how he had killed that wolf. We're still trying to find information on Wilsey. Wilsey never married, never had any descendants. He did live long enough to become free during the Civil War or after the Civil War. He was a hero of the area on multiple occasions for multiple reasons. During one massacre, the Russell family, he followed. Black Hawk had sent 6 Native Americans down to create havoc, and they went down and they massacred the Russell family, and then immediately after that split up into 3 groups to confuse the trail. So Daniel Boone, being the commandant, gathered people and they went down to the Russell place within an hour. So 2 of these Native Americans split off and were intended on finding Daniel Boone and killing him as a prize. And to get to him, they had to go by the Bryan farm, the Jonathan Bryan farm. In doing so, Wilsey trailed him the entire way. And they spent the night out, and Wilsey was careful not to fall asleep so he didn't make any noise while the other Native Americans were camped right nearby. And then he tried to keep up with him. And as he was approaching the Jonathan Bryan farm, where he was quite familiar because he was raised there, he heard a gunshot. And he feared that the 2 Native Americans were attacking Mary because she was there with another black lady named Jemima, who was a helper, not a slave. And while her husband and her boys had already gone to the scene of the massacre, so they were left alone. So Wilsey came running up just in time to see 2 dead Indians in the front yard of the house, and hollering. He got Mary to say, "Yeah, come on in, it's okay." And what had happened is one Indian attacked the front door, and before Mary Bryan could get the door closed, he got his arm in with a hatchet. And Mary said to Jemima, "Get the hatchet, get the hatchet." Well, Jemima took the hatchet and took it one more step, stuck it in the guy's forehead, and dispatched him. The second Indian came up to the side and tried to attack at that door. Mary got to that door and found a rifle. And the pioneer women were just as good a shot as the pioneer men. They knew how to handle a rifle. So she quickly dispatched the second Indian. So Wilsey was considered a hero for tracking them and being right there. And if it hadn't been for Mary killing those 2 Indians, or Mary and Jemima killing those 2 Indians, they might have gone to the Boone farm where Nathan's wife and grandchildren and so forth were there and could have done great damage. Daniel having already been gone and found him.
What a complicated foreign world to us.
Yes.
Complicated and foreign world. You know, here you're talking about this fella, Wilsey, that was a slave and held in tremendous high regard for multiple reasons.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and I mean, I don't know, but it was, was held, shared the roof, with
Oh
many,
yeah.
many people,
Oh yeah.
so.
He lived in the house, ate the same meals. It wasn't that he was sent out to live in a cabin or something or a squat by himself. No, he was family, um, especially after my great great aunt became lost, and she was 3 years old, lost in the woods for 3 days and nights in the winter, and all the pioneers from all over gathered to try and find her. And of course, they didn't have much hope that she would survive, especially since they heard wolves howling and the coyotes. They were afraid they weren't going to find her at all, that she'd been uh, devoured by the wild beast. Anyway, Wilsey would go out every day and search himself. He would make sure that all the people were fed and got their supplies they needed, and then he would go out and look. And on the third day, um, he didn't travel very far, maybe 3/4 of a mile, and found her under a little outcrop, half frozen, and scared to death. She wouldn't even come to him. She tried to get away from him, and he calmed her down and fired off a gun, which was a signal, and brought her home. So after that,
this would be a great movie. The life of Wilsey, I mean, kind of thing.
Just Wilsey alone, just one person alone. And all the pioneers were heroes like that. All the pioneer women were heroes like that. But after that, there was no wrong that Wilsey could do. He was considered the hero of the Midwest.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, these are stories that need to be told, and I don't know if anybody knew about Wilsey until they found the manuscript of your great grandfather.
No. I mean, there are a couple of letters that William S. Bryan wrote to Mr. Emmons, who and Mr. Shoemaker, who started the Missouri Historical Society, and they conversed back and forth. So he had written about Wilsey in one of those letters. And it was a sad note. William S. Bryan knew Wilsey all the way up until his death, and was basically looked after by Wilsey as a small child, with his two sisters being essentially grandchildren of Jonathan's, children of Elijah's, and Elijah Bryan was going bankrupt and losing his farm and all his property. And the sheriff was coming soon to auction it all off. Well, Wilsey was a slave, therefore considered property, and he would have been auctioned in this, and no telling where he would have gone. So it was agreed that he would be sold to a doctor that needed somebody to run his buggy and take care of him and help him with medical emergencies. So Wilsey was sold, to the heartbreak of everybody. But that doctor kept making rounds in the area, so he would bring news from other places, and he would come and lance boils and set broken bones and treat many people. And there's stories that I used to hear as a kid from the old timers about a black doctor in the Gray Summit area, which was close to Washington, Missouri. And it turns out that it was Wilsey, because he learned many medical practices for the doctor that he drove the wagon for. So he was able to treat people for minor things.
That's really neat that you heard stories about somebody
as a child.
Not, just these little stories that we hear. And, all of us have said, oh my gosh, I wish I had written that stuff down. I wish I talked to grandma, all that kind of stuff, but you actually found a manuscript from these people.
Found a manuscript, found letters, found notes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really, really cool.
And his story is in the book. I don't know how or if I'll ever find whatever became of him. Currently, I'm trying to research the tax documents and the doctor in Franklin County. Franklin County does have very good records, tax documents before the Civil War. And of course, slaves were considered property, therefore they were taxed.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could chase that a little bit and see, maybe kind of see when he falls off the roster there. I don't know, so.
Yeah, you would hope that he took the last name of Bryan, which might make it easier to trace him after the war in a census.
Alex has a great question there. He says, what happened to the salt makers, hunters that traveled with Daniel into Blue Licks after they were captured on their salt making expedition?
He was asking what happened to the Salt Licks?
The salt makers that were captured. Remember, Daniel was out there. I think that was 1777. Was that 76? That they were up there at Blue Licks making salt.
Yeah.
Daniel negotiated, let him not be killed. They took them all as captives. I don't know if there is an answer to that. Do you know an answer to that? I know that they assimilated a whole lot of them into the tribes and things. Did they get to go home? Or?
I know that he ended up living with that tribe and being adopted by that tribe after his capture.
I think it was 78, January of 78, I think is what it was. Yeah.
And eventually, even Rebecca thought he was dead. Everybody thought he was gone. And there is a rumor that one of the Boone children is not Daniel's because she had given up thinking he was dead. But that's just a rumor. I don't know if it's been established. One of those stories. I know that, Dave Brown has a question about Boone had to run a gauntlet. And I'm trying to think of who also had to run a gauntlet, not once, but twice. With
Simon Kenton ran 9 of them, I think. So,
how's that?
I think Simon Kenton ran 9 of them.
Oh my God! Most people didn't survive the first one.
Simon Kenton's not normal, so he would have been.
He
would have been he was your Gronk of the days. He's your Gronkowski. He's the, he was a big tough man.
Yeah, Alex McNamee was saying that Jemima might not have been Daniel's, but Ed's. And, it's, who knows? There's no way to do the DNA at this point because everything's dust.
Well, yeah, they're so intermixed, at that point in time too. So, and Teresa's asking you to mention how we get the book again.
Oh, okay. There's a couple of ways to get the book. Amazon has now got the book back up again. They say that if you order it from them, you probably have it around January 21st, 22nd. So Amazon.com has it. Barnes & Nobles has it. You can get it from me on eBay. Just go to eBay and search for Daniel Boone and his neighbors. And when you get it from me directly, I will autograph it. And if you send me a note with your order telling me how you would like it personalized, I will do that. If we're cousins, I'll mention we're cousins and how we're cousins. If it's a gift for somebody, you let me know, and we will gift it to or make sure that that person knows that you gifted it to them. Also, you can go to our website at danielbooneandneighbors.com. And there's a button there you can click that'll take you directly to our eBay store. Or if you don't want to use eBay, you don't want to use Amazon, you don't want to use it in the internet, you're one of the folks that likes to send a check, there's a little place you can fill out, and it'll send me a note, and I will email you or call you on the phone, ask you how you would like to pay for it. You can use a credit card or mail me a check, and I'll do the same thing. I'll personalize a book for you and mail it out. So a couple of ways. Just all you have to do is search on the internet for Daniel Boone and his neighbors, and it comes up at several locations. But if you want one personalized, eBay or the website's the best way to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And Teresa talks about George Rogers Clark appealed to the Virginia legislature to pay for debts and other supplies for the defense of the forts. George Rogers Clark is one of those guys. The amount of things that guy accomplished, that people don't know who the heck he is. It's just mind-boggling. It's just absolutely mind-boggling. And it's another fella that could have ended up absolutely ridiculously wealthy, with all the land and things that he had that died pretty much penniless. And he was the conqueror of the old Northwest. He's a George Washington of the West. Mm-hmm. Just a tremendous guy. That's another one of those Scots-Irish guys, but
that's mixed. I tell you what, we're tough.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. So, but well, is there anything else you want to talk about this evening before we head out of here? Or?
Well, I think we're probably boring people to death at this point, although we still do get messages. I'm from Indiana. I know Clark, fourth grade Indiana history. Yeah. Christy Eli was talking about General Clark.
Make sure we've got several videos about GRC there on our YouTube channel that are pretty good. We're on site there at his monument there, and Vincennes, Fort Sackville, and things. We've got a story there at his house there that actually the replica cabin that was there burned down last year, and we did the story before that, luckily. And then we've got another video we just did at his grave that hasn't even been released yet, but that'll be released here in the next few weeks.
Yeah, excellent. Well, I want to wish you a Merry Christmas.
Yes.
Yeah, Happy New Year. And I see your son's doing well. Tell us about your boy.
Oh, that's well. Huh? You don't have to. You can actually root for him because he did not choose to attend the Ohio State University.
So, I knew he had some sense.
He'll be signing on January the 14th with for the track and field team of the University of Louisville. So
cool.
Yeah, we'll be Cardinal fans. So.
There you go. You're very proud of him. He's done quite a job. You have every right in the world to be proud of him.
Yeah.
Good looking. Must get it from his mother.
He does. He does. Yeah, he does. My dad told me at Christmas, he's like, I never looked like that, even in my prime. I don't know what that got.
His mom's got good genes.
Yeah. Absolutely. You gotta marry right. That's anyway, we go on and on and on. Teresa said
Same thing I did. My kids got their mother's look. Thank God they don't look like me.
What's new for what are you going to be? Are you going to be I know COVID's a big mess right here. Are you going to be moving to? Are you going to any festivals or you and I have heading to Missouri ourselves?
The real descendants of Daniel Boone, I've sent them a book. They're going over it. And there's talk of me going to Atlanta, Georgia to do a little book signing down there. We'll be doing a book signing in Washington, Missouri in May at the Washington Historical Society. They have books for sale. So does the Boone, Nathan Boone home, Daniel Boone home. They have our book for sale there. So if you're in Missouri and you want to grab a book, you can at the Nathan Boone home or the Washington Historical Society in Washington, Missouri. So that's what we have booked so far. Like I say, this spring, I will probably start in your neighborhood and go westward. Anybody that wants to see me or have me talk, just drop me a line and we'll come and we'll bring books and we'll talk and spend a day drinking coffee and tea and discussing Daniel Boone.
Yeah, let's. We've talked about that a few times, but I'll go ahead and throw it out here on public. We ought to go out there this summer, and spend a few days, there at Nathan's house and at the Missouri grave and the Bryan house, and shoot some live videos together. But we could actually invite some of the folks to go with us and almost have like an impromptu little event reunion.
There's a wonderful place at the David Bryan farm. It's the Boone Historical Boone Memorial home there in Marthasville, right next to the cemetery, run by Bernardo, and he has little cabins you can stay in, period cabins, and the David Boone home. But one thing I'd like to do with your photographic expertise is possibly line up the shots with the two Bryan brothers standing at the grave of Daniel Boone, which they claim is the actual grave, not the one that Kentucky got to dig up. And Teresa, we'd like to see you there. I'll take you to your relative's house there next to the Lemp Brewery in St. Louis. Teresa Kern. But with your expertise of lining up, maybe we could transpose those pictures from the 1860s, William S. Bryan and his brother standing at the graves that their father pointed out to them of Rebecca and Daniel.
Yeah.
And see if we can't discover it through the photographs.
There you go. Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's go ahead and get it on the schedule. We'll make a Facebook event and let's go ahead.
I'll be there in May, and the leaves should be kind of down where we can get some of the forest in the background. The leaves won't be so thick that we can't get a shot in the background.
Yeah. We should put it on there. Get this organized with the people there and get it going. Life's too short. You don't know what's gonna. We don't know if we can put it off till next year. So
no, not next year. We'll definitely do it in May. I think it's May 10th. I'll have to look it up for you, and I'll text that to you. You can post it. But yeah, if you wanted to meet about that time of year, let's do it. And because I'd like to figure out a way. I mean, do you know what I'm getting at when we're talking about transposing the old photos over new or vice versa? Do you have the ability to do that?
Yep.
Well, yeah, let's do it. Let's see if we can't figure something out.
Yeah, that makes sense, wouldn't it? Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
I'm not bringing my shovel.
Well, you don't need to. I've already got underground radar.
Okay. That's right. It has been done. Yeah, we're good there. So
the school of Rolla, School of Mining in Rolla, brought out a radar and located all the disturbances in the cemetery. And oddly enough, there's one where the Bryan brothers said Daniel was. It's unmarked. So maybe
makes sense. They say his heart and his mind still in Missouri, right? So
his heart and his mind and his skin and his liver, all the soft parts are in Missouri. All Kentucky got was the big bones.
Yeah, buddy. It's beautiful both places. So we got videos of both places. So
we have video of both. There's an interesting book called Finding Boone that you might suggest to folks. And this fellow, he even talks to Ken Kemper, talks about spending an evening having dinner with Ken and his wife. But he does quite an investigation in locating what possibly is Boone. He doesn't answer the question, but he creates a lot more questions. And actually, he was able to acquire the castings of the skull that they took out of the grave, and had a forensic scientist that specialized in skulls examine it. And you can get the book and see what he says.
Yeah. It's kind of like watching any of those Bigfoot those Bigfoot shows or alien shows on the History Channel. I never saw anything, So.
No, that just keeps you that way we can sell the next book.
Right. So, yeah, man, let's do that. So, Well, thank you so much for coming on here again with us. I think we should do this again.
I love to. I really appreciate you letting me do this, Russ. Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much interest on your family tree, and there's so many folks that are connected to that. So, so it's wonderful that you're able to bring that on there with some insight that people want to hear. So I'm glad.
And here we were going to go 15 minutes, and I see by your little clock on the wall, we've gone 1 hour and 40 minutes.
Yeah. I told my wife, I was like, I'll see you later. I don't know when we're done. So.
We never can keep it to what we plan. We have so much fun.
Yep, absolutely. So, all right, Mr. Broderick. Well, thanks for having you on. Merry Christmas to you. Make sure you get yourself a book, one of the ways, shape, or form there. Make sure you have one of these. And anything else you want to say before we go?
Check us out on eBay or Amazon.com or Barnes & Noble. And like I say, if you're in Missouri and you want to run out to the Nathan Boone home, there's a book available there. There's 20 books or so, 30 books at the Nathan Boone home. And there's 10 or 15 books at the Washington, Missouri Historical Society. I just shipped them another 10. So if you're wanting to get it for a Christmas book or a Christmas present, you're in Missouri, I have autographed all those books. So at least you can get an autographed one. Won't be personalized, but it'll be autographed. Okay?
Yeah, buddy. Yeah, buddy.
Thank you, Russ.
Yeah, buddy. Hey, Merry Christmas to you guys. And hey, remember, family tree nuts, let our nuts find the nuts in your family tree.
Congratulations to your son, too.
Oh, thanks.